Good morning everyone. I am Bonnie M. Magpuyup, and today I am going to discuss to you the topic, the brain and cranial nerves of the nervous system. Before I would discuss the topic, let us first identify our learning objectives. First is to know the principal parts of the brain. Second is the protection of the brain, its main structures and functions. And lastly, the 12 pairs of cranial nerves. So, what is a brain? The human brain is a central organ of the human nervous system. It weighs about 3 pounds and consists of billions of neurons. It controls thought, memory, emotion, touch, motor skills, vision, breathing, temperature, hunger, and every process that regulates our body. What we have here are the major parts of the brain, or the regions of the brain. First is the brainstem. It consists of medulla oblongata, midbrain, and pons. Second is the cerebellum. Third, diencephalon. It also consists of thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus. And lastly, the cerebral hemisphere, or known as cerebrum. So let us first discuss the brainstem. A brainstem is superior to and continuous with the spinal cord. It controls many autonomic functions and serves as a relay station to other parts of the brain. So a brainstem consists of midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. First, we will discuss the medulla oblongata. Here, the green one, as you can see. Medulla oblongata is the most inferior part of the brainstem. It contains centers that control heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, swallowing, and vomiting, among others. Next is the pons, here, the color blue one. It is also called the bridge. It is a rounded structure that protrudes just below the midbrain. It relays sensory information to the cerebellum. It does have an important nuclei involved in the control of breathing. Lastly, the midbrain, the red one here. The midbrain or mesencephalon is a portion of the central nervous system associated with vision, hearing, motor control, sleep and wake cycles, alertness, and temperature regulation. Next is the diencephalon. The diencephalon surrounds the third ventricle. It has 3 major structures: the hypothalamus, thalamus, and epithalamus. Epithalamus forms the roof of the ventricle. Thalamus relays station for all sensory impulses to the cerebral cortex except smell. Example of this is when we are sleeping. Diba different things could wake us up when we're sleeping? Like for example, there is an extreme change of temperature or loud noise. Diba it might wake us up when we're sleeping? Everything except for smell. Why? Smell is one sensory modality that does not synapse in the thalamus before connecting to the cerebral cortex. This intimate connection between the olfactory system and the cerebral cortex is one reason why smell can be a potent trigger of memories and emotion. Next is the hypothalamus. It produces hormones, regulates emotion, hunger, thirst, behavior, body temperature, and circadian rhythm. We will discuss the cerebellum. A cerebellum is a large cauliflower-like. Its function is the coordination of movement and error correction and maintenance of posture, muscle tone, and balance. In the image, we can see a posterior view of the cerebellum. We have the cerebellar hemisphere, the left and the right hemisphere, and the one that is dividing the 2 hemispheres is what we call the cerebellar vermis. Now we have the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. It controls voluntary movement, speech, intelligence, memory, emotion, and sensory processing. In the image, we can see the left cerebral hemisphere and the right cerebral hemisphere. And the one that is dividing the two hemispheres is what we call the longitudinal cerebral fissure. We also have the sulcus, or known as the shallow grooves, and gyrus, it is the elevated ridges. Kung titingnan natin ang loob ng brain, we can see the cerebral cortex, or the gray matter, which is the outer surface of the brain, is associated with higher level processes such as consciousness, thought, emotion, reasoning, language, and memory. Dito naman sa gitna is the cerebral white matter. It modulates the distribution of actions, potential acting as a relay and coordinating communications between different brain regions. Ito naman nakikita nating gray spots. It is called the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia are associated with variety of functions including voluntary motor control, procedural learning relating to routine behaviors or habits such as bruxism, eye movements, cognitive and emotional functions. Now I am going to discuss the four lobes of the cerebral hemisphere. The first one is the frontal lobe. It is located at the front of each cerebral hemisphere and positioned anterior to the parietal lobe and superior and anterior to the temporal lobes. It is responsible for thinking, memory, behavior, and movement. Next is the parietal lobe, a part of the brain positioned superior to the occipital lobe and posterior to the frontal lobe, that integrates sensory information from different modalities, particularly spatial sense and navigation. It is responsible for language and touch. Third one is the occipital lobe, located at the back of the head. This is the visual processing center of the brain. It is responsible for the sight. Lastly, the temporal lobe. It is a region of the cerebral cortex that is located behind the temples and beneath the sylvian fissure on both cerebral hemispheres of the human brain. It is responsible for hearing, learning, and feelings. Now that we have identified the principal parts of the brain, we can now proceed to the next topic, which is the protection of the brain. So, how is the brain protected? First, we have the cranial bones. It provides rigid support and protection of the brain. Cranial bones consists of frontal bone, parietal bone, sphenoid bone, ethmoid bones, temporal bones, and occipital bone. But I will not discuss it further because it is part of another organ system. Next, we have the three cranial meninges. It separates the soft tissue of the brain from the bones of the cranium. It encloses and protects blood vessels that supply the brain. And it consists of dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. So dura mater surrounds and supports the large venous channels, carrying blood from the brain toward the heart. Arachnoid mater, it helps protect the brain and spinal cord from a sudden impact. Lastly, pia mater, it acts as a barrier and aids in the production of cerebrospinal fluid. And lastly, we are going to discuss the 12 pairs of cranial nerves. The first pair of the cranial nerves is the olfactory. Its function is purely sensory. It carries impulses for the sense of smell. Second is the optic. Its function is also purely sensory. It carries impulses for vision. Third is the oculomotor. Its function supplies motor fibers to 4 of the 6 muscles that direct the eyeball, to the eyelid, and to the internal eye muscles controlling lens shape and pupil size. The fourth one is the trochlear. Its function supplies motor fibers for 1 external eye muscle. The fifth one is the trigeminal. Its function conducts sensory impulses from the skin of the face and mucosa of the nose and mouth. It also contains motor fibers that activate the chewing muscles. Sixth one is the abducens. Its function supplies the motor fibers to the lateral rectus muscle, which rolls the eye laterally. The seventh one is the facial. Its function activates the muscles of facial expression and the lacrimal and salivary glands. It also carries sensory impulses from the taste buds of anterior tongue. The eighth is the vestibulocochlear. Its function is purely sensory. Vestibular branch transmits impulses for the sense of balance, and cochlear branch transmits impulses for the sense of hearing. The ninth is the glossopharyngeal. Its function supplies motor fibers to the pharynx or throat that promotes swallowing and saliva production. It also carries sensory impulses from taste buds of the posterior tongue and from pressure receptors of the carotid artery. The tenth is the vagus. Its function, fibers carry sensory impulses from the motor impulses to the pharynx, larynx, and the abdominal and thoracic viscera. Most motor fibers are parasympathetic fibers that promote digestive activity and help regulate heart activity. The 11th is the accessory. Its function is mostly motor fibers that activate the sternocleidomastoid and trapezius muscles. And lastly, the hypoglossal. Its function is purely motor fibers, control tongue movements, and also sensory fibers carry impulses from the tongue. So how to remember cranial nerves? Mnemonic way. So, di ba as a student, nahihirapan tayong mag-memorize. Kagaya ko, nahihirapan akong mag-memorize na mabilisan. So, gumagawa tayo ng tricks para makabisado agad yung mga mini-memorize natin. So, sa cranial nerves pala, may mnemonic way pala to remember the 12 pairs of the cranial nerves. So, dito, may sentence dito. Each first letter ng word sa sentence nagko-correspond ng pakakasunod ng 12 pairs of cranial nerves. So, the O, 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 to touch and feel, very good velvet, such a heaven. So, yung pagkakasunod niya, ito, olfactory nerve, optic nerve, oculomotor nerve, trochlear nerve, trigeminal nerve, abducens nerve, facial nerve, vestibulocochlear nerve, glossopharyngeal nerve, vagus nerve, accessory nerve, and hypoglossal nerve. So, paano yon? Nakabisado na natin yung pagkakasunod ng cranial nerves. Pero yung sa function, how about sa function? So, meron din ganun sa function. Itong sentence na, some say money matters, but my brother says big brains matter most. So, ito yung pagkakasunod ng functions niya. Sensory, motor, both sensory and motor, both sensory and motor, sensory, both motor and motor. Dahil sa mnemonic way nito, madali lang natin makakabisado. Hindi tayo mahihirapan. Before I would end this video, I would like to read what Benjamin Franklin said. Tell me and I forgot. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I learn. May we have fun and have productive learning sessions ahead. Thank you.